we've got to up our game if we're really going to race to the top as something more than rhetoric. If we're really going to mean that we are trying to be more competitive.
We've got to do things differently. We're going to have to operate differently. We've got young people coming into our systems with meeting more and more challenges. We can't stay the way we were 10 and 20 and 30 years ago.
Hi, I'm Wayne Diorio from Scholastic Administrator. I'm with two of the most respected education leaders in the country, Dr. Rudy and Dr. Manny Rivera. This is part one of our conversation. Rudy is the former superintendent of New York City, the largest school district in the country. He also ran the Miami-Dade Public Schools and was named National Superintendent of the Year. Manny Rivera, himself a former National Superintendent of the Year in Rochester City Schools, recently left his job as New York State's Deputy Secretary of Education. He and Rudy have joined forces to create Global Partnership Schools, a company that helps turn around low-performing schools by focusing on student outcomes. How did you two get to know each other, and where did the idea for Global Partnership Schools come from?
Sure. Well, I met Rudy more than 30 years ago when he was actually the Deputy Superintendent in Boston Public Schools. I believe he was responsible for curriculum and instruction. And then from that, I sort of followed his career over time. We never actually worked together other than seeing each other occasionally and maintaining a friendship over the years. But what was very similar to my own thinking, Rudy was someone who was always very passionate about kids and about education. We firmly believe that children in our schools, especially urban centers, were being steered to meeting sort of minimal standards, if you will, adequate yearly progress. And we fundamentally believe that our young people needed to meet international standards, global standards, if you will, as well as our schools meeting global standards. So we called ourselves Global Partnership Schools as a result of that.
And tell me a little bit about the work that you've done already in some of the school systems.
The kinds of interventions that people have been talking about and the things that people have been trying to do on a day-to-day basis in their respective schools and districts certainly is a starting point, but we believe fundamentally that it's got to be significantly faster paced, it's got to be deeper, it's really going to have to focus on professional development with teachers, it's going to have to ultimately create new leaders and sustain those that are really being very progressive in their thinking. A lot of our curricular standards and the work that we're in the process of doing now obviously becomes part of that footprint. The creation of and the building of new assessments so that what we're really doing is not really just, I think as Manny just said, not so much just trying to chase kids to AYP or build schools that meet AYP. It's a milestone of sorts, but I'm not so sure that it advances people's lives into a world that we know they're going to have to live their life in. And so that's really been our work. We've really been trying to work hard on the development of these standards. We think the Common Core standards are really going to be very helpful to us and to schools ultimately. But we think that there are some other domains of learning that we should be in, and it's not just about academic proficiency, but we want kids to be able to work and to understand the world of work. We think it's important that they have some sense of their own adequacy and literacy as a civic-minded American. We think that it's also important that they have some sense of their own personal capacity and their ability to be upstanding, if you will, moral, thoughtful, caring human beings. So all of those really represent kind of a new, if you will, dimension of how we think about learning.
Manny, there's been a lot of talk, certainly from the White House, about college-ready students. Is that the goal? Should that be the goal?
We really want to provide a very rigorous core curriculum, if you will, that truly prepares young people to be able to make decisions when they leave, to be able to know how to problem solve, to have that global perspective, whether they're going on to college or not. To be prepared for college, you also need to be prepared for work, and so it's the rigor that we have as part of what we want to focus on.
Sometimes at the urban level, getting parent involvement is difficult. So you're both successful urban superintendents. How hard did you have to work to try and do that?
One of the really more difficult aspects of the work is to create demand, really, for quality schooling in communities that have, in many cases, not surrendered the dream of a quality school, but simply don't know the method by which to acquire it or to help build it. They don't know how ultimately create that for themselves. And so I think the important sort of takeaway from the experiences that I've had is that this is not about doing more to force people to come to our schools. It's much more about creating a menu that could be going out to the community and to the parents. And that menu is a way of being able to ask them to be a deeper, better consumer, if you will, of the educational services, to be a better partner with us and ultimately with the school in helping to provide the very best and the highest quality schooling we can for their children. It isn't as though parents don't want to do that. It is as though they simply need a menu of offerings, a way of learning about how the system works, how to manifest their expectations in a way that actually communicates those to the system, how to support their child at home, how to connect to resources in their own community, and where those resources don't exist, to create them, to go leverage them into the community. In more affluent communities, parents do this, and they do it in large part because they are present all the time. A lot of the communities that we see ourselves as being in are going to be communities that ultimately need to learn how to do that. And a good deal of our work is going to be on that side of the equation. And yet, as Manny talked about earlier, we've got schools that have been extremely well-versed in how to do this. Their parents exactly know what to do. And in those cases, we still ask the question, but even with all of that, are your children really globally competitive? Are they really ready for a 21st century place at the table? And we think that there's still work to be done, even in those communities and even in those schools.
Just to build on what Rudy said, many years ago in Rochester, parent involvement was defined by whether or not parents came to school-based planning team meetings and were actively involved, or were they part of the district advisory council. And I think what's evolved from that is, yes, that's good for parents to be involved at their school and PTAs and on various district-wide councils. But what's more important and more fundamental is the direct involvement and support for being involved in the education of your child and being connected to that school. That school recognizing that they have a responsibility to reach out to parents, to engage parents. For what reason? To really understand and know students. That's how you can more appropriately plan for their educational program. Not just necessarily looking at their reading score or math score, but what are some of this student's interests? What's some other data and information about this student should we know? And parents can provide that information. So I fundamentally believe that a level of parent involvement that we would like to see is one that really truly extends and brings parents in as partners. And if they can't come in, there's an outreach to get parents involved in more ways. As distinguished from what we call, as part of our company, creating a surround care network of various community service providers, addressing students' mental and physical health needs, other types of social service needs that might extend to the family. So it's got to be a combination of direct, first of all, a district valuing that and saying we want that, we expect that, and as part of our professional standards, this is what we want to see, as well as their ability to reach out and engage and bring in community partners as part of that process.
Check back with us for part 2 of this conversation.